Good morning, fellas. What's up?
What's good?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Sue. Good morning, Mom. Um, I think just the fact that those two had the reactions that they had to the topic alone is a big reason why we have this problem that we're going to talk about today. But we'll get into it later. But welcome to another team meeting where our mission is to distract you from your current story, dismantle your current belief system, and inspire you to change your mind, which will then inspire you to change your life. Um, I feel like it ain't been five of us on in a minute, so it's good to have the starting five and maybe the sixth man to join us later. But all of the places y'all can follow us, but our mission is to serve. So whenever y'all see us, we like the likes, we like the engagement, but please share because we want to get in front of more people and help more people. So, what is the focus for today? So the focus for today is that black people get married the least and we divorce the most. How it came about this, I can't even remember it. It was like Wednesday morning. I was reading my book. Somehow I ended up researching marriage. I know I sent a message to Mace about the podcast idea for him. And somehow I ended up looking it up. And I saw the numbers. I was like, wow, like this is crazy. And to keep it G, the first person I thought of, he just hit 1 million subscribers, is Kevin Samuels, right? And I know he has a unique delivery, he's a unique person. But the numbers really do back up the basis of what he'd be saying. Maybe not like the way things, those other kind of things for each personal situation, but the overall numbers of our culture, it was kind of shocking. So I thought that we should talk about that today. So before we talk about the divorce rates, the marriage numbers, and all that kind of stuff, first let's talk about what is a commitment, right? Because marriage is, I'm not going to call it a commitment because the numbers don't say that, but it's supposed to be a commitment, right? So let's talk about the definition that I always say that I stole from Inky Johnson. So a commitment is doing what you said you would do long after the feeling that you set it in has departed, right? So for example, I think this is the Baptist version. I looked it up. So at a wedding, more or less to me, the whole point is to say these words or some variation of these words. And then after that, when you step down from the podium, you jump the broom or whatever kind of ceremony that you have in your culture, her culture, his culture, or whatever, then you got the rest of your life to live by those words, right? So will you, person, have this other person to be your wife or your husband? Will you love him or her, comfort and keep him or her, and forsaking all other remain true to him or her, as long as you live? Not for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, not till he or she's in a wheelchair, not till he or she's mom or father dies, or none of that. As long as you shall live. I, person, take the other person to be my wife or husband, and before God and all of these people that I have fly out here or drive out here who ain't seen me in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe they see me all week, to come watch this ceremony, right? And to be faithful and true to my husband or wife. So you make a commitment. There's something that you say when you're all happy, you all dressed up, you're in hopefully this dream location, all of your family and friends there. I chose this woman. I got chose by this man. I chose this man. I got chose by this woman, whatever. And we ended up here today, and we're going to be together forever, right? As a super simple version, that's what marriage is, right? It's a commitment to each other from that day forward. This my man, this my girl, this my situation, this where I'm at with it, right? That's marriage. So marriage is temporary. Question mark. Is it? Well, let's check some things out. So according to the Census Bureau, and none of this stuff is my opinion. Like the things that the information I'm going to display is not opinionated. It is all research based by credible sources. Whenever somebody watching or is watching now, go do your own research so you can find out that it is true. But according to the Census Bureau, 54% of white adults and older, 18 and older, are married. 60% of Asians, 46% of Hispanics, 30% of African Americans. right? All right, so we're the lowest out of those ethnicity groups, out of those culture groups. While Asian and Hispanic newlyweds are most likely to interracial marriage in the United States, the most dramatic increases in interracial marriage has occurred among Black newlyweds, 18% of whom married someone of a different race or ethnicity, up from 5% in 1980. About 1 in 10 white newlyweds are married to someone of a different race or ethnicity. So we get married the least, we divorce the most, and we are the culture who is by far marrying outside of our race. Right? Love is love, but I think that's a unique point, right? That we'll get into later. So we get married the least, we get divorced the most, and our current trend in the grand scheme over the last couple of decades, we're marrying outside of our race at the most rapid pace. All right. So the marriage to divorce rate, and this is from the National Center for Family and Marriage Research Family Profiles. And this location was at Bowling Green, right? So once again, credible source. The marriage to divorce rate was 2.2 in 2018, meaning, and they don't do the census every year. It's like every chunk of years, meaning there were slightly more than 2 marriages for every 1 divorce in the USA. And then also, according to the public, I didn't research it, but last year was a very, during the pandemic, it really increased the divorce rate. All right. So these are pre-pandemic numbers. So the marriage to divorce rate by ethnicity. All right. And I'll explain what this means because it's kind of like mathy. So for every 1,000 people, right, 32.1 white people were married in comparison to 15.1 divorces. So the first number is the number of marriages. Second number is divorces per 1,000 people. Once again, from the National Center for Family and Marriage Research, right? So 32 to 15 for white people, Black people 17 to 31, Hispanics 33 to 18, other 36 to 12.4. So notice that we are the only group who has a negative relationship, meaning that more people get divorced than get married per 1,000. All racial ethnic groups have more marriages than divorces. Other race women, including Asian, Indian, Alaskans, and multiracial women, had the highest marriage to divorce rate, 3.0, meaning 3 women married in 2018 for every 1 divorce. The second was Hispanics, 2.5 married for every 1 divorce. White women, 2 for every 1. But Black women, for every 3 married, there's 2 divorced, right? So essentially, that's like a 66%, right? Right? For every 3, 2 divorced, right? Black women were the only group that had a higher divorce rate than marriage rate, with nearly 31 divorces per 1,000 married women ages 15 and older, and only 17.3 marriages per 1,000 unmarried women. So once again, just raw data to say that we get married the least and we get divorced the most. So now, the same numbers, but grouped by education. So less than a high school GED diploma, 14.4, 1.9. High school education, 25.1 to 16.4. Some college, 34 to 20. Bachelor's degree, 54 to 14. Master's degree, 58 to 12.5. So that data tells me the more educated you are, the more likely you are to get married, like by far. From, let's say, the average of these two, it is 56.05, 1428. That's like 350% the chances of somebody who doesn't have a high school education, and somebody who does have a high school education is more than double the chances. So women with a bachelor's degree had the highest marriage to divorce ratio at almost 3 marriages per every 1 divorce. This is similar for women with a master's degree at 2.6, and women with less than a high school degree is at 1.9, and a high school degree or GED is 1.8. In some college education, 1.9 had comparable marriage to divorce ratios at about 2 marriages per every divorce. So these numbers in this paragraph is for every number in the parentheses, that equates to the number of 1 divorce. So the 2.6 marriages per 1 divorce. 1.9, basically 2 marriages per 1 divorce. So the more educated you are, the more likely you are to be married. And then lastly, by age group. There's a lot of numbers, so I'll just highlight it. But ages 25 to 34 is by far the highest time to get married. 75% of the people in this age group get married, in comparison to 23.4 divorcing. And the lowest age group, which I think is obvious, is 65 and older. But by far, 25 to 34 is the time period where most people get married amongst all races in America. In 2018, there were about 14 marriages for every 1 divorce among 15 to 24-year-old women. However, the highest marriage rate was among those aged 25 to 34, with 75.3 marriages per 1,000 unmarried women. Those aged 45 to 54, 55 to 64, 65 and older all had more divorces than marriages in 2018. Only 2 age groups had a higher divorce rate than the marriage rate, age 15 to 24, and those were age 65 and over. And I guess that's a big miss by me, but this is women, right? Because it's literally not making an opinion, but marriage at the beginning process is like a man choosing that he wants to marry this woman, right? And it's like something that women like security. It's like the ultimate beginning of security for them, right? So all of these are based off of women getting married and divorced. So now, more marriage facts from a different source. The National Healthy Marriage Resource Center. All right, so let's check these out. And obviously, I focus on African American information. So marriage has become less common among African Americans. According to the census, African American households are the least likely to contain a married couple compared to other racial and ethnic groups. Similarly, an African American child is 3 times more likely to be born out of wedlock than a white child, and on average will spend only 6 years in a 2-parent family, compared with 14 years for a white child and 13 for a Hispanic child. However, surveys indicate a high value placed on marriage among African Americans, right? So in our culture, which it was too much information. Marriage is very, very, very high on our list, right? Especially at the church. But I should have got those numbers. But in comparison to other cultures, the marriage education in the Black church is also the lowest, which I thought was kind of unique. It was the lowest by far. But our culture has a very high value on marriage, but we get married the least. And our children are the least likely to be raised in a married household. All right. Marriage in our community appears to vary based on educational attainment and income, especially among men as potential marriage partners for African American women. Marriage appears to contribute greatly to the economic well-being of African American families. That's a big one that goes into a bit more detail a little bit later. African American mothers in urban cities, according to the Fragile Families and Child Well-Being Study, have strong pro-marriage attitudes, yet they are the least traditional in their attitudes about gender roles and marriage. I think that's a big one. In the Black community, we by far, according to like the male-female culture, we by far have the strongest women. Like we're the same. Like there's no man, like how Hispanics, like the man is this, or even in the white culture, but like in the Black culture, we the same, right? And there's information on why that is now. And I don't mean like I'm a man, you a woman, just bow down to me. No, but I think if we're being mature, everybody knows what I'm talking about. But being married is like being chosen. But we have problems with gender roles in our community, right? According to them. So only 45% of African American households contain a married couple, compared to 80% per whites and 70% for Hispanics, the U.S. Census Bureau. There is a marriage gap in the African American community based on educational attainment. Only 28% of African Americans with no education are married, compared to 55% with education. So once again, you're twice as likely as a woman to be married if you have a degree. One explanation for a lower marriage rate among women, as identified by blackdemographics.com, and this is what I always say before I saw this, is related to the earnings potential among Black men. With higher college graduation rates among African American women, the median fell 12% for Black men, while rising 75% for the women from 1974 to 2004. A higher earning woman has little incentive to marry a low earning man, right? And that data is also now even more skewed because in America right now, out of all the cultures and demographics, the Black woman is the most educated. The Black man is the least educated. So if marriage is supposed to be like, I'm the man, I'm the leader, I choose you as my woman, over the years, women have came up and up and up and up and up and up, and we stayed the same. So why should they respect a general culture of men who has not developed? And according to the education numbers, that's an 87% difference since from 1974 to 2004. That excludes the last 15 years where now Black women are the most educated. So Lord knows what those numbers are if they're up to date. So over the years, the women have been cooking. They've been killing it. We can blame the system, blame the white police, blame the white educators. We can blame white people for everything, but they've been cooking somehow, somewhat, right? But we've been stuck. And once again, this is speaking for the masses, our entire culture, according to the data. All right. Black women divorce at a rate nearly double of either white or Hispanic women. All right. Once again, we always say it. Black women are also the most likely to leave a relationship. So we're the least likely to get married. We divorce the most. And Black women are the most likely to leave the relationship out of the different races. Okay. Once again, data, not me. Higher mortality rates due to poor health care, violent crime, and the ever-growing incarceration rates have been shown to decrease the African-American male population. This may be linked to the increasing numbers of Black women struggling to raise children and manage families alone. All right, so let's break this down. A couple of weeks ago, G had sent us a video essentially talking about that America is so expensive, with the number one reason being our health system. Right, it's very, very, very expensive, and often the number one hurdle of someone switching from a 9-to-5 life to an entrepreneurial life, like getting them benefits in that healthcare. But the healthcare system don't make us pick up that soul food every day, that mac and cheese that we shouldn't be eating, that chicken that we shouldn't be eating, that pork chops that we shouldn't be eating, pig feet that we shouldn't be eating. Right, it's a myth that it feeds your soul. It tastes good. Right, we went to a school in Virginia with some very educated administrators, and I'm not gonna say who it was, but they called the Thanksgiving dinners plantation plates. Right, and we're not gonna turn this into a diet episode, but I just want to highlight that we do have a huge, we have control over the things that we control, but we don't, knowing that we have healthcare the way that we do. Once again, speaking collectively for everyone, this is not every individual. Violent crime. The number one killer of Black men ages 1 through 44 is gun violence. And 1 through 4, and also in the top 4 for ages 1 through 19 and 20 through 44 is suicide. So we're literally killing each other and killing ourselves. Incarceration rates. There's a system, but all of us know people locked up. Does anybody watching or any of you know anybody locked up because of the system? I only know people locked up because they did stupid stuff. Anybody know any people locked? Let me check the comments. Anybody know anybody locked up because of the system? Okay, so this ain't everybody, but I don't know not one person locked up because of the system, right? So a lot of men are not here because of things happen, but a lot of it we have control of. We have control over, right? So Black men are not really available to the numbers. According to blackdemographics.com, the low rate of marriage and high divorce rate in our community are decreasing the African-American middle class built on a 2-earner paycheck. So our middle class is also deteriorating because we don't have 2 earners, 2 people in the building, 2 people in home getting to it, right? We got a lot of single moms, few single dads, few together moms and dads, whether that's married, relationship, whatever. We have very, very few of that, and that's bringing our class down. All right. So that's enough of the facts. So now let's talk about what a relationship is, and then we'll have a discussion. So this is all based off of research. Once again, no opinion. But this is from Game 7, our relationship curriculum. So What is a relationship? A relationship is passion, duties, and responsibilities where inner turmoil and expectations must be overcame so that the passion can be maintained, which leads to the continuance of fulfilling those duties and responsibilities. Right? So let's break that down. So passion, right? I just met this girl. I just met this dude. I'm head over heels. Super smart, super intelligent, ambitious. We got an intimate relationship. We got a physical relationship. We have great communication. We got a dope family, or comes from a horrible family, but he or she is the one that's the shining light. They're different. I just love this person, right? And then that starts to fade away, and then you start to find out that he gets super angry when he doesn't do good at work and he carries it home, or she has a horrible relationship with her mom when she doesn't show up to Thanksgiving, or he had a kid who him and his baby mother used to have a good relationship, but now she broke and it's a child support case and all these other kind of things. You start to figure out who's in charge of what. All right, so person A is the calm one. So she is going to be the one who is in charge of de-escalation. She's in charge no matter what. Or person B is the one who is the ambitious one. So he is the one who's going to make our financial plans, right? And whatever the case may be. So to make that financial plan, you got to communicate every week. You got to take out the deposits. You got to make the financial plan, all that kind of stuff. Those are the responsibilities. If you're the calm one, you got to set up the counseling. You got to know the de-escalation techniques, all of those kinds of things, right? But then people have inner turmoil, right? Maybe that person couldn't fix a thing with their baby mother, or maybe that person couldn't mend a relationship with their mom, or maybe there was some sexual incompatibility or something because my man not healthy and his blood not flowing right when it's time to flow right, whatever the case may be. And then now you're not meeting each other's expectations. Oh, I thought she was done with your baby mother. Why she keep calling you? Yo, she called because I got to get my daughter. Like, whatever the case may be. Or I thought you said you wasn't going to talk to your mom anymore because y'all always argue. But that's my mom. I can't just leave her. Right? And then the passion is gone. And now you're not fulfilling your duties and your responsibilities. Right? So to maintain the left side, each individual has to meet the other person's expectations and also make their expectations clear. And the other person must be willing to buy in to meet those expectations. And also, you got to be mentally and physically healthy. So in the bubble, this is what a relationship is. And clearly, collectively in our community, we're not meeting expectations. And we got inner turmoil that's rocking the boat and forcing us to separate because the passion is gone. You're not fulfilling your duties. And you're not fulfilling your responsibilities. That's a relationship in the bubble. All right. So compatibility. This is the basic part of a relationship. But just because two parts go together, they are compatible. But just because they go together doesn't mean that they're the best match. Doesn't mean that they're the best match, right? That's why you start off with like a type. Like I remember when I first met T and we was talking about her, and she was like, "Yo, I could have told you that was her." Like you said, that's exactly your speed. You know, we all have a type, right? So that's compatibility. Does this person fit my general interests? Then the next deeper level is chemistry. Chemistry is very important, but it's not quite connection because it can be developed doing things like team building or dating, spending time together, right? Chemistry is developed, but connections is like a spiritual alignment. It's like, yo, I just met him or her, and like it just worked. You know, like if I ask any of you about your wife or your girlfriend, you probably really can't tell me what it is. It's like, yo, she just has this thing, right? That's because we got two different minds in our brain. Our neocortex, where we're like, it's like our frontal cortex, where our intelligence is and our language, but our limbic brain is our emotions. So our one wife and our girlfriend in our relationship, they tickle our limbic brain. So it's kind of hard to put in words, right? So the strongest relationships have an instant connection with experience aligned. You can feel it from the very beginning. That's what people refer to as love at first sight for like an intimate relationship, or day one. Like me and G is literally like day one. It's like the day we met, we just bonded, you know? So as we're going through this, we're talking about marriage, but also keep in mind that marriage isn't the only kind of relationship. So let's get to the basis of it before we have our discussion. At the basis is compatibility. So are we compatible, right? And this is something that I studied from Spirit, who's a therapist. She got the Love Goals show. Does a lot of things on Oprah. She's got books and series and all that kind of stuff. I spent a lot of time studying her information. So intimacy to her means into me, see. You feel me? Like, do you understand me? How well do you know my deepest, most vulnerable parts? How well do you know me? When I show you who I am inside, do we really truly line up? The strongest type of relationship is one that rises, right? Acronym. So R, recreational intimacy. Do we do things together? Do we like the same things? Like, is one person a thrill seeker? Is the other one super conservative? That may not work. Right? You go into the park and they get on all the roller coasters and you just standing there looking dumb. Right? Or it's a financial investment that's kind of risky, and now y'all arguing because you an ETF man and she's a growth stock woman or whatever the case may be. Right? Recreational intimacy. Intellectual intimacy. Do we feed each other? Can we have conversations that inspire intense stimulation? Do we both enjoy this? Do we both want this? That's one that definitely connects to me because like I normally don't talk until I got a reason to talk. Um, and the things I talk about are normally kind of different. And the other people probably think the same thing about me. Like, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about this. Or I think this is an intelligent thing, or I think that's it. Intellectual intimacy. S, spiritual intimacy. This is different than religion, right? But do we see the same concept of the world, the creator? How do we exist? Do we see ourselves the same? Are we spiritually connected? Or do we make other questions about our own spiritual growth? Right? That's a big one because although it says spiritual, it's basically like religion, and religions are nothing but beliefs and rituals. Right? So if you got a strong belief system and different rituals, it's going to be hard to connect with somebody who does not value those or somebody who's not open to you pursuing those. Emotional intimacy. Are we warm and fuzzy? I feel like you get me. I feel safe and vulnerable. Or are we the opposite, tough and strong, right? So can we, once again, that's kind of more so like connection. Like, do we, them two people that show up, like, damn, they've been beefing, and it's always like that. Or you got the other couple that comes up, like Justin Keith, who always giggling and won't be quiet all the time, So emotional intimacy. And the last one, which obviously is a big, huge one, sexual intimacy. Do we like the same things? Do we like each other's fire? Are we explorative or conservative? How much? How often? Do we feed each other in this passion place? So a relationship that rises has these kinds of intimacy. So all right, if you're questioning yourself, maybe he or she is not the one. How do I know? Ask yourself these questions. So number one, simple. Do you miss your partner when you're apart for a long time? Emotional intimacy when we're in alignment, when we're in sync. So when I don't have your presence near me, then everything about my world is out of sync. Now, you know how it is when you're away from him or her for a long time. You start to think about it. Or we all know these other kind of dudes and women out here, they be away and they doing their own thing. They're not really missing nobody. Number two, do you trust your partner? There's a big difference between missing your partner and wondering what they're doing when they're not around. Like, I just miss her, or like, is he texting them other girls, or she got her ex over there, whatever the case may be. It's not only do I trust you in behavior when I'm not around, but do I trust you when you're with me? Do I trust you with who I am, my secrets? Have I told you everything there is about me? Especially like with women and their security, that's a big thing. They must feel safe. And as a man, same thing on the other side, but you got to be able to withhold that information and support her. Do you have compatible lifestyles? For example, a lazy person is not going to rock out with a very ambitious person. It's just not going to work. Maybe in the beginning, but eventually they're going to outrun them. And three more. Can you talk to your partner about anything? That's an obvious one. But a lot of people in a relationship, they have secrets. That's that inner turmoil and often leads to those expectations that can't be met. Two more. Do you laugh together? Right? Simply, laughing is healing and a huge part of life. So do you laugh together, or are y'all always serious? And last question. What do these answers tell you? What do these answers tell you? So I flew through that because it was a lot. But all in all, in our community, our women get married the least, they divorce the most, and we're also marrying outside of our race faster than any other culture. You're most likely to get married between 25 and 34, and you're far more likely to get married if you're educated with a bachelor's degree or a or a master's degree. So let's go in order of like experience. Let's go KG. No, let's go KP, KG, G, then Just. I got my reasons.
Yeah, I already figured that. So how, I mean, this is a very heavy topic, right? Like we talked about divorce, we talked about influences on education, we talked about divorce rates based on marriage, we talked about what love is, what a foundation is, and just me personally, I'll touch on the subject of like the divorce rates. Me personally, as a wedding photographer, I get a chance to really see like what you do with your money, and how you really spend your bread for that particular. How you get your bread for that particular, or what kind of money you put up to display your love or to show that you actually love that person. And one thing I've always noticed is that, like, yo, if you don't got it, yo, you don't got it. And I think that is a major influence on people's foundations, right? Like if you start your relationship off before God and everything is great, and then you've already put up $70,000, like, yo, how you about to live? How you about to live on Monday, right? And how you about to live from now on, and what kind of pressures does that provide on top of the relationship where you guys are financially strapped? I know people who've got married, like personal people who've got married and spent over 50 racks, and then now they're struggling, right? And then now everything else kind of weeds off into their life, arguments and different things like that. So I think that when we talk about like the African American community, I think one thing is that we get influenced so much by what we see. And we think about like what we want, where it's like, oh, I want this very big, extravagant wedding. I want this, I want that. I want flowers everywhere. I want it to be like Keisha and Gucci. And then you'd be like, all right, cool. And they throw the bread up for it. And then afterwards, after they throw all the bread up, yeah, we have a great day. I'm not complaining. I'm the photographer. I'm doing it for 12 hours. But at the end of the day, when they move on the next week, it's like, yo, what did you do in order to provide like a light, right? And then I think another great example, I did a wedding. I won't say the weeks, so that way the person can't come back and say like, oh, that was my wedding you're talking about. But the bride literally had 3 outfit changes and like literally just sat there the whole time. And we're talking an 8-10 hour wedding and didn't break a sweat. And it got to the point where you realize like, yo, she did this all for photos, right? Like y'all spent all this money for photos to portray a particular life. And at the end of the day, like, yo, you don't live this life like this. I mean, you might live it, but like, just take it easy. So when I look at certain races and I look at certain foundations, I think sometimes we set ourselves up to fail from the beginning. And I think that is like one major crucial thing that can be proactive. One thing that people can be proactive with to kind of prevent the increased marriage or increased divorce rates that we are seeing.
Dope. Yeah, it was definitely a lot of things talked about so far. But one of the things I want to focus on is kind of the history of why I feel like a lot of us don't get married. And part of it is growing up. A lot of us don't grow up with fathers in our households, right? So then it's oftentimes that moms are forced to raise children by themselves, right? And then, for the men, they don't have an example of seeing what love is. And same thing with the daughters. So love, even though, love is kind of a universal thing. You talk about it from when you're so small. Love is actually a learned thing. No one can sit there and be like, well, I know how to love. Like, you have to literally learn how to love, just like you have to learn how to be a social human being. You have to learn all these things. Love is socially learned. So when you grow up and you don't see what that looks like, then when it's time for you to then take that step of finding the person that you want to be with, then a lot of that stuff that comes from the past, you don't know how to communicate. You don't know how to XYZ because of the fact that you just didn't see that example growing up. Then also, then sometimes you have, hurt women raising, kids, right? So whenever you have an individual that's hurt, that's already going to change their perspective on something for someone else before they get a chance to have that mindset. Right. So if I was a divorced woman or a woman that never got married and then I still have kids, right? You're going to hear comments because I heard comments when I was growing up about, well, he ain't nothing, XYZ, he's trash, right? And then when you have women that hear that, then as the women grow up, then some of them have that expectation of, well, I don't need a man. I can be independent by myself, right? So sometimes it's a choice that people make based on what they think their past, based on what they think is the best for them. And then same thing for men. Like a lot of men don't know what it feels like, especially black men, because that makes them feel, dang. You ever hear a guy say, you married, oh, it's over for you now, bro. It's over for you. Like that's one of the common things that a lot of people say when marriage is brought up. Oh yeah, you hang them up, bro. So it's a lot of different cultural stigmas behind that idea of marriage, based off of just a lot of history of the prior relationships that our family and our culture kind of went through, for sure. And then as we get to the topic of interracial marriage, I'll speak out on that because obviously I'm the only one in here, I think, in the interracial relationship. So I could definitely speak on that, but I want to give everyone a chance to speak first before I go dive into that.
All right, bet. This topic is like, it's so many different factors, right? But the one that I keep coming back to is finance. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the number one reason for divorce is money. So at the beginning of that marriage, it's on the man, like you said, Mal, to ask the woman to marry him. And to KP's point, we know our women love to, and I'm generalizing, but they love the flair. They want our weddings to look beautiful. They want that big event is what they dreamed about. And to a certain extent, many of them deserve it. But as a man, even as a really good man, as a high value man, however you want to put it, there is a lot of pressure there to be able to deliver that. And sometimes, again, like KP said, you tend to over deliver, which makes for an amazing event. But then you got the rest of your life where there's still expectations on your end, there's expectations on her end. Y'all may have kids or will have kids. And that's when the real part, that's when the strife comes in, because you have to maintain a lifestyle. So on the front end, there's that stress. I think on the back end, the responsibility leans more towards the woman, because like we said at the beginning, a marriage is a commitment. And if the numbers show that Black women are leaving more than any other demographic, man, woman, regardless of color, then I think that the onus is on them to understand that outside of that event at the beginning of your marriage, you are supposed to be here for the long haul. So you're making that commitment as a woman. As the man, you have the obligation to set the marriage up at the beginning. And Portia's right. Not all women want that, but I'm generalizing. So when the woman enters into that commitment, she has to stick around. The man has to do what he has to do to get her to that point. It's a tough dynamic, but I think that the biggest issue is we as men aren't necessarily meeting the standard that these women need. Like we talked about, especially because women are increasingly getting degrees. They're increasingly the breadwinners, and men aren't necessarily answering that call. It's limiting the dating pool for them. And now I think that's why they're starting to look outside of us to find men that match their swag, that match their standard.
All great points, fellas. All great points. As I was listening to the information, I thought about this conversation I heard Dr. Umar Johnson have on the Breakfast Club. And he was talking about how historically marriage is the basis of the economic stability of Black people, right? Historically. And that's why once that was identified in like the 50s and 60s, because like post-slavery, we did have trouble, obviously, economically. we had got into a really good groove of things and had a very, very large economic stability basis amongst Black people. If you remember, like, in the 50s and 60s, Black people had their own, finances and economic basis and banks to be able to fund things like their, civil rights movements, things of that sort. And there was a sense of community, and we could definitely foot the bill to a certain extent. And that became like enemy number one for our government, right? To dismantle the Black marriage. And of course, we can have full number of conversations about how that was done and what the after effects have been, whether they've been, adding drugs into our community, adding weapons, our men are incarcerated at, the highest rates, which, then creates a domino effect where now marriage is no longer modeled in the Black community, right? It's extremely hard for a child to become something that they don't see. And that goes with anything, right? If I happen to grow up in the house with a doctor for either one of my parents, or a lawyer, or a judge, or another high executive professional, I mean, that's extremely obtainable to me as a child because I interact with it daily, right? It's not a far-fetched idea. So the opposite is true too. If I happen to be a Black boy and I grow up where a male is not present, that's obtainable too. When I get to be an adult, the fact if I'm not present is not like it's anything wrong. It's actually my norm, right? So the conversation of marriage and how it exists really is a human behavior conversation, right? Because that's what's just being replicated from generation to generation at this point. And Black marriage hasn't been present for so many generations at this point that there's just a norm of it either being dysfunctional or not being present, okay? Also, another note that I took is that Black boys and Black girls don't see a consistent example of a Black man who is a provider, right? Now, we all know that, financial or economic stability is huge, not only just to marriage or relationship, but to someone's mental health, okay? We're coming out of a pandemic where people's pockets have been tapped in a way that they haven't been historically, maybe since the Great Depression, okay? We know that marriage, divorce rates are at an ultimate high. We know that, coming out of this pandemic, we will see suicide numbers, increase and spike. We already know the mental health damages and risks that exist, as a reality of us being in this pandemic. And while many people have been struggling with a health issue, financial issues are by far the biggest reason why people stay in a constant state of acute stress. Okay, everything in our society, in our economy, is built on financial stability, and if you don't have it, it creates a huge issue. Okay, so the fact that us as young Black boys or girls are not seeing a consistent male provider is huge, because it just is, once again, another reality that replicates itself from generation to generation. Also, Black men have become intellectually inferior to their partner, and we are the only race where that exists. That's huge. That's huge. Intellectual compatibility amongst partners is essentially like the basis of a relationship. Because I'll tell you, as the one person that's married on this call, and many other people, that are married, I love to see older marriages because, the love is there, but it's clear that they were able to last as long as they were because they could exist past the love, right? Because marriage is work, right? A part of being able to work together is being able to think together, or being able to connect with someone on a mental level so that you can get past whatever the issues are that you face. And to me, that's huge. If you're in a relationship with someone who is not intellectually compatible, there's a daily and consistent struggle that you're in, right? Thoughts create actions. Actions create behaviors. Behaviors are patterns, and essentially just, wind up embodying who this person is. So if from the root, the person is not intellectually compatible, which we already know is exactly the reality in our Black community, of course Black marriages don't exist. Of course Black marriages aren't successful. Of course there's a norm of dysfunction in a Black household that children are seeing, even if the man and woman are there together, because there's a constant state of frustration on both sides. There's a person who is intellectually superior, who is extremely frustrated that this other adult that I see as an adult is not thinking as an adult. And then there's the frustration of the other person who is now intellectually inferior. They know they're intellectually inferior. They know it, right? Now they're trying to overcompensate, and usually comes out by belittling the person or bringing up things from the past to try to get some kind of dominance above them. And it's just an unhealthy situation, right? So this is once again, like we're talking about, why we see young people, we see Black women deciding to date or marry outside of their race, because the need to be wanted and to be claimed is still a natural need for men and women. And women are, in a space, in a time where it is a lot more socially acceptable for people to be to be interracially married or interracial relationships. So the natural need is never going to go away. People are just going to find another way to meet that need. And that's the basis of it. For me, I believe, is the lack of intellectual compatibility and which obviously, winds up pouring into your ability to produce and your ability to work through things, right? So for me, I look at relationships very much like marriage and relationships are work, all right? For many of us as young professionals, we will learn systems to be able to be successful professionals, but we don't see where that could wind up being the savior for our relationship, okay? In education and a lot of other different industries, there's something called a UBD model, okay? Understanding by design. And essentially it's backwards planning, all right? You identify whatever your goal is, then you identify whatever the milestones that you will reach that will prove that you're en route to that goal. And then you create a plan, right? If the goal is a successful, happy, fulfilling marriage, there are certain things that I need to see along the way from myself and the other individual to prove that we are headed in that direction. And then there are plans that we need to create around expectations, standards, conduct, things of that sort, right? And while we'll utilize models like this at work and maybe in our community in different kind of ways, depending on what hats we use, we don't utilize those skill sets in the home because we like to somehow believe that work and relationships are different, when in fact, businesses and work thrive and continue to grow despite the changing need because of these systems, right? But once again, this brings it back to an intellectually compatible partner, right? If you have a person who is an executive or a senior level professional, and you have somebody who's an entry level professional, right? There are two different mindsets, two different realities of what is possible or what accountability looks like or the potential for change, right? All of those realities produce whether something works or doesn't work. And for me, I think, whether you have seen a successful marriage or a successful relationship in your life doesn't mean that you can't have one yourself, right? For me, I'm a perfect example of it. My parents were together very, very young. They stayed together. They definitely had their rocky experiences in life. And for me, my dad explained something to me which I'll never forget, and I'm so thankful for him. He said, son, some people are put in your life to show you what to do, and some people are put in your life to show you what not to do. And in many cases, he understood that he was there to show me what not to do when it came to certain things, especially when it came to relationships, love, and care for your partner. And not to say that he was a bad dude, by no means, right? Extremely, extremely bright light. But he understood that there were things that he lacked, and he wanted to ensure that he could point those things out to me and my brother so that we didn't replicate that behavior. Now, we are left understanding what not to do, which is 50% of the battle. Now we focus all our attention on, all right, what are the best practices, right? Blessing in it is that we're both educated, we're both lifelong learners, and we're committed to not becoming the individual that we saw him be. Now, that doesn't mean that our partners, and in my case, my wife, that she doesn't experience me falling short of the mark. But it's also, I'm thankful that I'm my wife's friend first, and that's how our relationship developed, right? And that we have time in, because she's been able to see my development in certain areas, to be able to overlook some of my shortcomings and understand that, hey, he's not exactly the individual that I need him to be in this moment, but he's a stone's throw away from, or, miles away from where we began. So I know that I've been long-winded. I want to leave with a sense of encouragement for young people who haven't been in a household that have seen a successful marriage, whether you're black, brown, white, purple, or whatever your color is. I mean, successful relationships, and not seeing them plague everybody. You understand? We struggle with just overall relationships at this point, as people. Everyone puts their needs first. No one wants to compromise. And everybody thinks that they're the shining light. And that's great to believe that about yourself. Believe me. I am the epitome of that. Believe it. Right? My younger years, man, I really thought I was a God gift to the world. And that helped me achieve a lot of things. But that also was that's a thorn in your back. And that winds up being your Achilles heel when it comes to you making a decision to be in a partnership with somebody, because that give and take is real. And understanding that you have blind spots and you have weaknesses, and there's areas that you need to grow and work, right? And trusting whoever you're in a relationship with to identify those things and not, take criticism from a negative perspective are all cycles that you have to mature and learn how to accept and make those changes. And that comes with a sense of maturity, which for me, all right, and this is the last point I'm gonna make. Developmentally, we know that males don't develop at the same rate or pace as women. Women are extremely, extremely prepared in a natural sense to be caregivers, to be holding together the family structure, and they have played this role and have assumed this role in the absence of men for generations at this point. So I'm extremely, extremely thankful for the part that they've played, because everyone knows that it's mama's baby, daddy's maybe, especially in our culture, unfortunately. But the reality of it is that strong women have existed and they have taken their rightful position, and at this point that they're not willing to deal with certain nonsense. Right? Like they hold the position where men have been absent for so long. And for me, there are some realities that Black men have to understand when deciding to be in a relationship with a Black woman, because historically they've had to do that for so many generations at this point. Now that takes you having some emotional intelligence. All right. Understand that you need to chip away at this individual because there's such a hard shell of protection or vulnerability that they're not willing to expose because of so many people or systems have hurt them in ways, right? But I think it definitely it takes a man to understand that exists, number one. Number two, create a plan to be able to meet the needs of his lady, and understand that he needs to continue to evolve and grow. Right. I know Kevin Samuels always talk about a high value man. And that's definitely a bit of a trend right now. But I'm gonna be honest with you, us on this call, we got we have a few number of male friends because, we can't find compatible men to be friends with. So I can only understand, I can only empathize with the reality of women when it comes to choosing a Black male that's of high value, right? So yeah, I'm definitely open to the rest of the comments, and I appreciate y'all being patient with my comments.
So let me jump in real quick because as you were talking, Jess, I thought about something, and I think we mentioned it earlier. But to have a relationship, there are a lot of factors, and it's not a simple thing. It's very complicated, right? And for years and years and years, people have had these complicated relationships, but we've had all of these other distractions, which kind of slow us down from having the tough conversations about the compatibility or incompatibility. But over the past year, people have been stuck in the house with their partner. So you've had to face these issues that maybe in other situations you wouldn't have talked about. And I think that's why we're seeing these increases in divorces. People, I mean, I've seen people personally, whether it be on Instagram or I've had conversations with, they've been together for years. And then in the past year, they broke up because they actually had to spend time with their partner. You had to sit down in the house and talk to your partner. And maybe you've been with them for 10 years, but just now, because you actually sat and talked to them for the first time, you realize you didn't even like them. So you have these people who get into these situations and you start to go through the motions. And the longer you stay in these situations, you get further away from being a partner because you like the person, and you do it just because you feel responsible because it's comfortable. So I think communication, just like we outlined in that circle, is truly important because you have to be interested. You have to be a compatible partner. So I'm curious to see as we leave this pandemic, as things continue to open up, as people go back into their normal routines, how that's going to impact the relationships that were impacted by being in the house every day for the past year.
Great point, G. One of my biggest asks or offers to people that are considering marriage is time. How much time have you had with this individual, right? We all know that time reveals all, okay? And for me, one thing that I've learned is as you get older, what you need changes. As you get older, what you need changes. At first, as a young man, you don't need, you may just need someone to be a listening ear. As you get older, you need a thought partner. You need someone that can help you put these thoughts in your head together on paper, help keep you accountable, help pull in different resources, fill in those blind spots, right? And the reality of it is if you're making a lifelong commitment in marriage before you're able to experience these things as boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, friends, right? The reality of the answer that you're going to get along the way may not be one that you thought that you were going to receive. And the only way to know that is if you're sticking in the relationship long enough time for those things to be revealed, right? And upon those things being revealed, you have to ask yourself the honest question if that's a reality that you're willing to exist in for the remainder of your life, right? So that's why for me, rushing into marriage is a very, very dangerous thing, because if you know that the individual that you are today will not be the person that you are at this time next year and your needs will be completely different, are you confident that your mate not can meet those needs for you, but can they be a help and a support? And can you do that for them on their own journey as well, right? That begins to frame how you see your partner in a different lens, because your partner is only a helpmate, right? They're not there to make you feel loved. You should love yourself first, right? They should increase and magnify the love, help, right? They shouldn't be the one to give you self-worth. You should have self-worth. And what they should do is highlight those areas for you in those moments that you're not confident, right? And all of these different realities that exist. Go ahead, G.
I just got a question. So based on what you're saying and based on the numbers, do you think that we as the Black community are rushing, the people who do get married are rushing into marriage before they actually get to know their partner? Do you think we're getting in marriages too soon, which then ultimately leads to us getting divorced because the person that we think we're marrying isn't actually the person that we married?
Two things. I think there's a social pressure for men and women to get divorced by certain ages. Unspoken rule, without
You
a
mean
doubt.
married? You mean
Divorce or
married?
marriage?
What did I just say? My fault.
Divorce.
Of course.
Yeah, my fault. Marriage. Yeah, right. Married. Right. There's an unspoken rule. That's the reason why people feel the pressure at certain ages. All right. By this age, I thought that I would.
The age is 30. The age is 30.
Okay. Yep. That's number one. Number two is there's not a norm in our culture of people spending enough time with themselves to know who they are and what they offer in a relationship and what they expect in a relationship, right? Many times, because we don't have the example of marriage in our household or even just a successful relationship, right? We don't personally have an experience being a bystander of a successful relationship. What we see celebrities. We see individuals on Instagram or those Instagram couples. And it's entertainment, y'all. Like, honestly, it's entertainment, right? The most raw, unnatural cut marriage that I think anybody has ever seen on TV is Bobby and Whitney. Them jokers, they were unadulterated, honest individuals, right? Now, that was dysfunction at a level that I don't think anybody necessarily wants themselves, right? But that wasn't scripted by no means, right? And for me, I think that, many times while people, want to jump into these relationships or marriages and they wind up failing is because they don't do the pre-work, right? You just don't get a job or a promotion without proving that you have the ability to be responsible for those next set of responsibilities. Because being married does come with another set of responsibilities, right? People are not doing enough of the dating your mate on a consistent basis. People are not doing enough of the counseling cycles of, the premarital workshops and going through premarital counseling. Uncovering some of the issues or strongholds that you experienced or that you've dealt with, over your entire life that you may not even be knowing of, but maybe your partner sees it, or maybe your partner doesn't see it, right? How have you been affected by how you were raised? How are you affected by being a black or brown person in America at this time and space that we're in right now? How are you dealing with those things? How do you cope? What is your automatic response when you have a tough day? Is it go to sleep? Is it eat? Is it exercise? Is it drink? Is it smoke? What is it? Because bad days are going to come, right? And they're only going to be amplified now when you have somebody else that you're responsible for, right? As being a married male or woman, right? So asking all of these questions and doing all of this pre-work for many times in our community is, oh, you're doing too much. You're trying to find something. You're trying to do X, Y, and Z, or you're trying to expose a reason not to marry me. And that's not the truth. What the truth is that we're going to deal with this anyway if we're in a relationship for the long haul. It's going to be exposed, right? I'm thankful that my wife didn't marry me until my dad died. I'm thankful. You know why? That's an experience that I've never had before, and it was important for her to see my reaction and if I could and how I would bounce back after experiencing such a traumatic experience. Because guess what? That's not going to be the first one. I mean, that's not going to be the last one. If you're signing up to be with me for a lifetime, there are people that I love immensely, and I'm going to lose them, right? In the time that we've been together, that is the first person that I've had a true, close, daily relationship with that is no longer in my life. Boom, let's see how he reacts. If he fold, if he turns to the bottle, if he turns to smoking, if he quits his job, if he starts doing X, Y, and Z, he exposes who he is at that place. And if he's not willing to seek and accept the help that he needs to rebound, then that's not a logical decision for me to make for a lifetime, despite me loving that individual. Because this is a reality that I'm having a chance to experience. You understand? So for me, that's why, once again, I'm such a big supporter of putting time in and having time in with your partner before making the decision to be married, because the things that time will expose are honest, they're true if you're willing to accept them. And it makes you making a decision that whether you accept it or not be so much easier if marriage is not another layer that you have to, overcome if the answer is no, that I don't accept it. Because at that point, it becomes a legal decision more so than a decision that is best for the both of you all. And for many people, they don't have enough legal experience not to become emotional about a legal decision, or enough experience, right? And once again, now since I don't have experience with something, I'm seeking advice from other people who usually don't have healthy divorces, and then we wind up replicating that cycle as well. So put the time in.
Thanks, Just Harden. Pass the mic back. But great points from everybody. I took down a whole lot of notes. So this one that I just thought of, number one, like, you don't need the experience, right? Like me talking about marriage as an unmarried man, and the data from the day, more people, the divorce rate is over 50%. So to me, if you divorce, I wasn't in a relationship, but the relationship failed, right? Maybe I knew not to make the commitment that you made, right? And I agree that in a marriage, I ain't been there yet. It's just a relationship. You just made yourself a legal entity, two people into one, more or less. You make the commitment mean what it means or it doesn't mean, right? But from my notes, so number one, why is this a heavy topic or a question, right? Like, but before we even got on, the first comment was, y'all having this conversation early in the morning, right? Or I'm ready for the conversation, right? Number one, speaking as a man, I think this is like a taboo thing in our topic, primarily because of the fear or the anxiety of the reaction from women, right? Primarily Black women, right? Why is this a heavy topic? And then even like when we do have it, especially, and I'm not even talking about like disrespect or nothing like that, but men, and I don't know if it's the same for women, they'll have a conversation on this topic that's totally different than if women are around, right? Either it's their partner, their wife, their girlfriend, or somebody else is trying not to get that man caught up with his partner, right? And I'm not talking about no disrespect. I'm talking about pure what people think, right? Why is it a heavy topic? Like, it's something that people do. It's like a lifetime goal for people. It should just be like a regular topic. Number two, the cost of a wedding. Almost all of y'all spoke on that. So is it financially plausible for the man, right? And obviously the woman is involved, but the man, we're wired to be providers. And a big part of that is having the income, not really to show off and ball out, but being able to support you and yours, right? And as G stated, financial issues are the number one issue for divorce. So number one, when a man hears marriage, he thinks wedding first. He's not thinking of legal bond. He's thinking pure wedding. He knows there's going to be a marriage. But that's the number one thing that he's thinking. Just like Pizzle said, that first experience, right? Clearly, some people get married just for that. The wedding is dope. They don't make it a couple of weeks. They don't make it a couple of years, whatever the case may be, right? So the first thing a man is thinking is not marriage. He's thinking wedding, right? So, and this is what I know from people I know intimately and just the general culture of men. A lot of men are pressured into marriage, right? There's there's a social pressure for a woman to be chosen by a man, not to be shacking up, not to be dragged along, not to be used and abused. There's a lot of pressure, right? And I've seen personally countless times. I hear you, Portia. You unique. You're not like everybody. You're unique. but countless times where a strong woman pressured a weak man into marriage. And then sometime later, that woman divorces that weak man because he's weak. The stronger woman pressures the weak man into a relationship. Or, and like we got the strongest personalities, the strongest kind of woman. Say that you got a financially savvy man who's coming from poverty, right? And he may have the means to drop the 20 G's for the wedding or to drop this for the honeymoon or whatever the case may be. But then he has to restart. And you're seeing like you have it. How come we're not doing it yet? Oh, he's thinking about getting the system going, right? It's not the time yet. I love you to the moon and back. And I know you want to get married. And I know you think it's just a bread thing. But you're not the one that's going, you're not on the pace to be the one that's going to change and provide for this family and everybody else, right? Or maybe you are. But ideally and generally speaking, that's the man. And then there's the pressure. Well, we need to get married anyway. It's not just about money. You putting everything off. All right. And then she leaves. All right. But then his plan comes about 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years later. And now it's a whole different story. And that person, whether that's the man or the woman, it's usually the woman when they leave, not realizing, like, all right, put some pressure on this man to make this plan. You got 5 years. Because if you leave, you got to meet somebody else. You got to restart. It's going to take years just to get back to that point. And you did not support that man through his journey because he was financially savvy. Like, this is 100% a money thing. Like, it's a big part of the general marriage and wedding process, and then staying married, right? Especially today where more women are intellectually capable in bringing in more money than a general black man, right? KG also highlighted we have tons and tons and tons and tons of scorned women raising our kids. Scorned. Right? And then we get in these step-parent relationships. Ain't nothing wrong with them, you know? You don't have to be the biological mother or father to love a kid to the moon and back and to take care of them. But a lot of us get into these relationships and we're still scorned from our previous relationships. And then we'll get in a relationship just to be in a relationship, right? Because that person sexually stimulates us or they intellectually, whatever, like just to be in a relationship, just to have a body in the house. Like, I know, like, there's a big emphasis on having 2-parent households, but I also know some people who would have had a better life if they didn't have that one problem parent in the crib. Or maybe that problem parent went away, and then mom or dad could have stumbled into a stepfather or a stepmother who was actually going to be there and provide what needs to be provided by a true provider, right? So I think there's an overemphasis on 2 parents in the crib and an underemphasis on the amount of resources that you get from the crib. You know, so it's not just the 2 thing, it's how much is actually being produced. And just because you're in a relationship for a long time doesn't mean you're in a healthy marriage. Like, we all know people been together for decades and they ain't happy. Like, yo, you probably would have been better if y'all just divorced 25 years ago. Even if you took 5 years to heal, then you ran into a good man or a good woman, had these last 20 to live your life right. You didn't have to be dragging him or her through the mud or like a ball and chain for these last 20 years. You could have been shining. But you tried to stay together for the kids, and now you suffering because you ain't been happy, not realizing that takes away from you as a parent. Because if you're an unhappy person, you can't be the parent that you truly can be. I saw a post from Game this week, generally speaking, and it kind of fits. Women fall in love with pockets, men fall in love with bodies. We all saw that viral video of everybody coming back from the DR to Atlanta. All these women feel like they got to go get some surgery. You know, like, people, and that's a whole different topic. Yo, work out. Work out. Simple, yo. And it's not something, if you spent 30 years taking away from your body, it's not something that's going to switch in 30 days. You feel me? But you give yourself a year of that smoke, you be all right. You be all right. So work out. Right? But like that was kind of sad seeing all them wheelchairs coming from the DR. Right? But women fall in love with pockets, men fall in love with bodies. Just talks about blacks are the only race where, I don't know what your words are, but basically the women are more intellectually capable than the men. That's a big thing, but also I think there's a lot of men who are on the other side of that, but we get so much blame as black men for not being there for our kids. I think that goes both ways because I'm not a woman, but and a man, I mean, I'm kind of like I fell victim to this too, but you choose the dude you messing with, bro. And then most of these dudes is not just randomly becoming bad dudes after the fact, right? So men have to do better, and women have to choose better, right? If you choosing a nut, you're gonna get a nut. Like that's the kind of dude you're gonna get. You know, it's not surprising. So there should also be a lot more pressure on the women to choose better who you're presenting your body to, right?
That's a two-way street though, Mel, too.
I said it. I said I'm you looking at one, bro.
Yeah, I got you.
You feel me? It's definitely two issues. But I'm saying like the pressure on the woman, like how a woman will say, you don't know what it feels like. We don't carry the baby. You feel me? So I think like there's even more emphasis because we can just give the baby. That's what we do collectively in our culture. We give you the baby, we gone. Like it's not ours. Like that's what a lot of men think. You don't have to carry it. But it is two ways, right? Women have to choose better, we have to choose better. Intellectual statement. So what Just was talking about is we need to reason inductively, right? So say you're writing your dissertation, and you start off with, I want to write about why college athletes should be paid. So you choose your title first. But then you hit the library, you go online, and you start to see that there's much more information on why college regular students should be paid. So you have to force it to fit your why college athletes should be paid. You have to force it to fit, right? That's like saying, I'm going to get married, and now we're going to start doing marriage stuff. Or let's be in this relationship and get it so strong to where we're truly committed to each other. And then we stamp it by going through this marriage and making this commitment to each other. Right. And that goes into the thing that Just said, like, yo, takes time. I know 3 people intimately who are married, who are still married. They all were with their wives for over 10 years by the time they got married. Now, a lot of that was baby years, like talking high school, college, freshman year, and like high school, right? So when you're 18, 19, you're going through stuff, but you're not really like going through adult stuff, in my opinion. Like, so you hit like 25, 26, 27 and up, right? But they spent so much time. And then also all 3 of them highlighted that their relationship got stronger when one of the 2 lost a parent. Just a unique experience, but like Just said, you give it time to see who that person is. How long that time is, who knows? 2 more things. What kind of dude do you want to be? All right, clearly it talked about the lack of Black men due to our health, due to our violence, due to our lack of education. But I think there comes a time where we got to stop blaming and hold ourselves accountable. Like most of us work in one of the roughest school systems in America, right? But a lot of these, sticking to the boys, they got a choice to do the things that they want to do. I was just with Just at a cookout yesterday. We was leaving. One of my former students who's now going to 10th grade was like, yo, you heard XYZ got shot? I'm in the 9th grade. I knew it was over for him in like the 5th, 6th grade. I knew it was over for him, because he wasn't built like that, but you could tell he was just surrounded by hood stuff, and he just made all the wrong choices because of how he was taught, right? Luckily, he's still alive. But I see it all the time where our young Black boys, they don't make the choices. And it has nothing to do with the system. Nothing to do with the system. Like, I'm seeing students die all the time. They get shot all the time, shooting people all the time. But when they come for the opportunity, like I've literally seen schools come in the building, a 3.0 student, a 2.0 student scholarship, just because you're from the hood in DC. They won't even go down to the meeting. They in the bathroom rolling up. Or they already smacked, and then their mom come to school like, yeah, I know, I smoke with him. Why he not in class? He don't got to go to class if he don't want to go to class, right? So there's so many opportunities that we don't take advantage of. And Just also highlighted something yesterday too. Like we spend so much time doing whatever bad thing or thing that's not good for us, and we expect to spend so little time once we make a transition to change, right? So I challenge all of our men and all of our women to adopt that Game 7 mentality. It's kind of crazy to the general person, but to get better every single day, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, that makes you such a better candidate to marry a better person. And it also makes you such a better candidate to stay married to that better person. And then lastly, simple one, an unhappy and unfulfilled person cannot be in a happy and fulfilled relationship, right? You can be temporarily, but if you, just like a team, like if we all on a team, we all the DBs, and I'm having a bad game, I'm getting cooked. Y'all getting cooked too. Because when those 6 points go on the board, they go on the board for the other team. Now next week I'm cooking, but just getting smoked. I'm getting smoked too. Everybody has to be prepared, right? It's just like now when the offseason is coming up for the NBA, you don't have to come back until preseason, and whenever that is, August, September. But the people that do the work between the season are going to be the best people during the season, right? So do your best to be mentally, physically, emotionally, financially fit so you can find the right partner. And then when that stuff comes up, like Just said, it's hard work, you'll be able to get through that hard work. So that's my notes. We'll do one round of responses, and then we'll address the comments. So y'all can just popcorn out, whoever want to talk.
Real quick, I think that DR video is the perfect metaphor because it's to get rich quick, right? You rather fly to a different country and go to a doctor who may or may not be certified to get a figure that you could probably obtain if you put some work in. It's no different than people entering relationships for the wrong reasons and saying, this person looks good on my arm, I'll marry them so it can look good to the public, as opposed to doing the work and spending the time to find a person that you're truly compatible with. So when you talk about the Game 7 mentality, that applies to every facet of the life. You can't have ultimate success without putting that work in. Pretty much anything that seems too good to be true is typically too good to be true. So regardless of what you're trying to achieve or obtain, go through the work, put that time in. Put that time in with yourself, mentally, physically, spiritually. Put that time in with your partner, put that time in with your circle, and then the results will be much more fruitful and long-standing than any shortcut that you can take.
And I'll hop in real quick. One thing I will say is that they always say love is more than skin deep, right? Like you really gotta know your partner, you gotta love your partner, and I think G, you hit some good reflections of that. Everyone hit great points. But you gotta really put the time in to learn your partner, know what person you're getting, know their foundation, to really understand if you guys are compatible. And I think also people are also scared to love sometimes. I think that's also another issue. That's another topic where if you don't come as a whole person ready to love, you never really find the true love. So put the time in, find the foundation, and just find the person that works for you. And understand that it's going to be rough, but the things that make relationships work is the ability to go through the ups and downs together, and make it through at the end.
Yeah, that's a great point, KP. Things aren't linear, right? Relationships aren't extremely linear. It's going to be ups, it's going to be down. But also one of the things is like learn. Like you gotta learn, because like I grew up. The only relationship I've ever seen my mom specifically have with a man was the relationship between my grandfather and her, right? So my learning across the love scale was my experience with women, right? So understand that just because you are with someone and you love them, and it doesn't mean you just have to jump into the marriage because that's what society wants you to do, or you think it's going to be lit. Or the worst one, right, for me is I can't stand when people see just a still picture of people and just say couple goals. Like you have no idea what they do, yo. You don't know what they do. It's just a nice picture, right? Somebody could have a picture in the middle right there with them looking at each other, and they say couple goals. Why? Like that's a one snapshot of a moment. That doesn't mean that they're happy. That doesn't mean anything. So for me, it's learning your partner, doing the work to become the best version of yourself first. So then your partner could then have, you know, that best version of you as well. And then when you come with two people coming with the best version of themselves, it's only going to lead to greatness. But I obviously, you got to understand, you just can't stop there. And one thing is with the happiness talk, you know, you can't expect someone to love you fully if you don't love yourself and aren't happy within yourself. That person, that marriage, anything is not going to fulfill you to that happiness, right? And that's that other part of that inner turmoil. You have to do that work to be a happy, peaceful person before someone else can bring you that. They might bring you that for a small amount of times, but ultimately, in terms of having a successful and a long-lasting relationship, that has to be drawn within for sure.
Great points, fellas. I would just share that the more effort that you make as an individual to make sure that you're happy and whole, the more work that you do, and the more time that you spend focusing on that goal, the more you can identify it in somebody else. All right, that in itself will help you to, you know, avoid a lot of turmoil or issues in relationships than if you don't know that. Also understand that if you're not someone that has faced the music in your life, that hasn't identified what your struggles are, the things that are holding you back, more than likely you're going to choose someone else who is in that same situation, and you guys are going to develop something called a trauma bond. Okay. Which, I mean, it's such a norm in the Black community, right? I'm with this person because, you know, my mother left my father. My father left my mother, and she's a strong Black woman and she don't need nobody. And then, you know, you meet another man who he wasn't raised by his father, but you're expecting him to be a man, and they have the same issues. They don't trust men. Neither one of them trust men, right? But you don't understand that, you know, as a woman, your husband needs male mentorship and male leadership to be the man that you need him to be, right? So, I mean, you've put yourself in a situation where, all right, neither one of you guys have good relationships with men, but he needs to actually develop these relationships so that he can fulfill the needs that you have or have expected from him. So just understand that, you know, the more work you do on yourself, the more you'll be able to understand the work in others, and will give you, you know, for me at least, I believe, a better chance of having a happy and whole relationship or marriage.
All right, so let's get to the comments. So from Miss Vicky. Hey guys, this is Vicky. Charles and I are listening to you all together, and as an older married couple, I agree. Getting to know your spouse and putting in the time is very important. In the past, back in the day, people were sometimes pressured into marriage due to circumstance like pregnancy, parents preaching the Bible says, this age, my biological clock is ticking, etc. This definitely has contributed to the high divorce rate, especially in our generation. So the pressure from society is not a new thing. It's just it's definitely a little different with the additions of technology, social media, regular media, and the likes. But I chose this one for last because it's unique. All right. So from the beginning, when we were talking about interracial relationships. So great facts. Women of other races do not make the same choices either. They will not procreate with men who earn less or are less educated. Great facts. Women of other races do not make the same choices either. They will not procreate with men who earn less or are less educated.
Woo.
I don't think that's true. Well, like there's certain things that if you're a Black man, there's certain things that other races are going to tolerate that a Black woman will not. Or do y'all disagree?
I think that's just cultural competence, right? I think Black women are more likely to understand a beginning behavior that is going to produce a bigger problem. That's why they cut it off, and they're not willing to deal with the signs of you heading there. Like they're not with it because they know where this is going. Whereas maybe somebody from another culture doesn't understand that, hey, look, this person didn't show up this time. Yes, they gave you an excuse. It may just be a singular situation. No, you know, a black woman might have enough experience with black men to understand.
So basically, you agree. You just trying to say it nicer. You agree.
I could see that being true. Have I had that personal experience? I would have to take some inventory on my life.
All right, go ahead, KG. I know you've been waiting.
To be honest, I mean, it's to me, it yes and no, I guess. Yes and no, and I'm trying to say things without trying to lead to the, as we talked about earlier, just people getting upset. And I've dated both. I've dated black women, white women, Asian women. And for me, it's just more so of like what the individual person is willing to deal with, right? How much is the individual person, individual woman willing to deal with, right? Realizing like some people, I've been in a relationship where I treated black women some trash, right? And you know, they stuck around with me and then until fed up. Same way with white women. So and etc. So for me, in my personal experience, it's all kind of just based on the personal things, you know, that the woman is going through. So like, obviously it's a stereotype that just like you said, like what you said, some people are willing to put up with other things more. Like a white woman is willing to pull up with a little bit more bull than a black woman is off the jump. And could that be true? Yes. Could it also not be true? Yeah. My thing is, it just all depends on the person's inner strength within. For myself, especially from my experience, and you know, I can't say if it's one thing or not, but I just noticed that you know, in my experience, sometimes when I make a mistake, when I was dating a black woman, instead of being understood, like at that time, and I'm not saying, and I'm not making a generalization at all. I mean, I'm not making just as laughing because I'm not trying to get crucified for sure. But in my experience, you know, when I made a mess up, for me, when I was trying to explain and trying to come with that empathy of being sorry and things, I got cooked. You know what I'm saying? It was like nothing I could do to ever come back from that. I was this, there, you trash, you this, you that. Versus when I was with other races, sometimes I got that too. But also sometimes I would get the empathy, and I'm sure same thing when I was with other black women, I got empathy too. So I all think it's you know, comes down to personal preference. Also, I think it comes within like the type of person you are. If you're okay with yourself, you know, you're not going to get crucified. Because I've been in some relationship, and I deserve some of that talk, right? Because you know, coming up, I wasn't the most lovable guy, even though I presented myself as being able to be loved. I wasn't the most willing to give out love. I could receive it, but I couldn't give it out. And that's also, especially from me, having that lack of experience from that love. But in my experience with interracial relationships, it's definitely varied from woman to woman with who's putting up with things and who's not. So I'm not going to just jump in and feed that easy stereotypes, because I've been in relationships with pretty dominant, strong black women who also, I've been in relationships with weak black women who I've been able to walk over, and vice versa for other relationships as well. So, you know, I think a lot of the
hey, let me give you some more conversation pieces, right?
No doubt.
So number one, I'm gonna ask you to be a bit more straightforward. Everything we're talking about is a case by case thing. How we're talking about black men, we ain't none of these black men we talking about. We not incarcerated. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 7 degrees on the call. We not most of that, right? We're speaking strictly general, like overall culture, because the numbers, the saying, the feeling, I guess this is the stereotype part, is that dudes mess with women from other cultures because they're easier to deal with. And then also the data says that we are by far the most rapidly increasing culture of marrying outside of our race. You know what I mean?
Well, for me,
conversation pieces to keep going into.
For me, that wasn't my reasoning. Of course, like for me, and I can see why that happens. Like I see a lot of, I know a lot of people in racial relationships. But for me, the reason why I feel like I went that way is because how I kind of was brought up, right? Growing up in Jersey, it was all black, right? But then at the same time, I didn't have confidence. When I was 6th to 8th grade, I was chubby. I kind of didn't have that. I didn't have that personality. A lot of people, I was weird, right? So a lot of the women that I wanted didn't want me. So then I went to Woodbury Forest, which is a predominantly, white school. It was all boys school, but then we would interact with, all girls schools too. And then I started to realize, like, cause I'm a weird character. I'm goofy. I'm silly. Right. Then I started realizing, like, I was getting accepted for being that part of myself. For when I was trying to do that part with like the black woman that I was interested, I would get looked at as, oh, he's a weirdo. You're a cornball. So then I just started going to the people who accepted me for me, and then that's what I feel like with men, black men, oftentimes, especially in my experience, I felt like I couldn't be myself. I was getting criticized for being like a weirdo, for being a nerd. And then it was also hard for me because I'm trying to mask this and being a football tough guy. So in my experience, when I started, going outside of my race, I also seen that it was like, dang, like, maybe I am able to get accepted and not have this stigma of being weird or corny or anything like that. Now I think that a lot of people who are going interracial see the same thing. Like, it's not this stigma or pressure of you having to fit the narrative of what exactly a black man is only. So that was the biggest thing for me. Like, am I black? Like, am I black enough for this black woman? Like, because my experience were a whole different. So that was definitely for me. And Miss Debbie said, define easier to deal with. I guess stereotypically, white women are less confrontational, are more likely to subside and succeed to whatever the man said. And in my case, I don't think that's true or not. I don't think that's true. If I've been doing some whatever, I've been called out for that no matter what race it is. I think it's easier to say that because we may not have a lot of interaction with that other race if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of interaction, because it's easier to say. We all know that. But for me, I wouldn't say they're necessarily easier to deal with. Just for me, in my life, a white woman, it was somebody that I just felt like understood me totally and didn't judge me for having different, just personalities than the stereotypical, I guess, black man.
So before you go, Josh, I see you. So to surmise it and tell me if I'm wrong, if I put down like one sentence, and I don't think you're talking about white women, but I don't think it's just white women. You're saying they're more emotionally intelligent, number one, and they're more likely to, in the sense of man, woman, they're more likely to serve their man, like I talked about earlier, in terms of gender roles. Would that be like a good one sentence synopsis of what you said?
Say that one more time.
So they're more emotionally intelligent, number one, and they're more likely to serve their man in terms of like woman-man relationship, not like no slave, you do what I say kind of stuff. In terms of like gender roles.
In my experience, yes. I'm not gonna say everyone is like that, but in my experience, for sure.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Jess.
No, that was G, not me.
Oh, my fault. Go ahead, G.
Oh no, I don't have nothing to say. I just got to get ready to go. So I'm sad that I have to step off because this is a very interesting conversation. Obviously, it's a lot to talk about. This is probably one of our longer podcasts. So hopefully the convo keeps on going and the people watching continue to take from it. But I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, peace out. So let's address these last two comments and then we out. So let's I guess just Pizzle and Just. Well, I didn't really speak on it either. But let's talk about define easier to deal with. So I'll go first and then Justin Pizzle. So for me, I can only speak from one side because I have absolutely zero experience of being in any kind of significant relationship with any other race. But just witnessing, like personally, and witnessing like through media, there's just I think it 100% correlates with the cultural setup of like other cultures. There being some kind of subservience to the men, like how now this past week, young black Twitter tried to cancel Beyonce because it catered to you. You feel me? Like that's the perfect. Like you gonna cancel Beyonce, bro? You feel me? That's the perfect definition of it. So I just think once again, only having one side of it is just that's probably the easier to deal with part. It's not so much of I don't think that people that go into interracial relationships, they're not expecting the same kind of emotional, intellectual battles that they had in the past, whether one person was at fault or they both was at fault or whatever the case may be, or they do have experience and they do believe that whatever other race they choose to marry or be in a relationship with is indeed easier to deal with.
I'll go ahead. I'll follow up on that as in regard to that comment of easier to deal with. Man, I was trying to think about it. Like, hopefully I can make the correlation for y'all. We've all talked to millionaires, right? We've all had the opportunity or talked to people who are very significantly like, you know, they live a very good lifestyle, right? When you talk to the individuals, how is it when you deal with them? Like when you deal with them, it's very laid back. They're easy to deal with. There's no problems. But what happens when you talk to the person who doesn't necessarily have it or the person who's struggling to get it? It's a lot more. Everything is intentional, right? This is what I need. So when I look at the comments of, and I've heard this before where people have said like, yo, white girls are easier to deal with. But when you're on a certain pedestal and you already have the resources available that you can present and you can live a certain lifestyle, of course you're going to be easier to deal with, right? Just like the rich person who's easier to deal with because they got it. But when you deal with the African-American woman who has to consistently defend herself or consistently change her ways or code switch or deal with microaggressions and deal with a lot of other things. So as far as, you know, African-American men deal with this too, I think, of course, it's going to be a little bit harder to deal with, right? You're a little bit more rough on the edges because you're trying to make it. You're trying to get to that level. So I always find it to be interesting when people do say, like, yo, white girls are easier to deal with. And I also think it's also like a cultural thing, right? Where it's just, it may look like that on the outside, but yo, once you actually get in it, you probably like, yo, it's actually not, you just as bad as the rest of them, right? But I've never been in that relationship. I haven't intimately dated outside of my race. But I mean, that's just one of the perspectives I kind of thought about when I think about like easy to deal with versus hard to deal with. What resources are available? How easy is your life? And how, you know, how that reflects on your personality and how you show up on an everyday basis.
Yeah, KP, I'm gonna jump in right before you say something, Malcolm. But yeah, KP, that was a good point, right? From the outside looking in, it's easier to say that when you don't have that experience. But from my experience, just like you said, excuse me, it's definitely both. Like I think just in general, it doesn't matter what type of race you are, woman. Like it's gonna when you coming from a woman and a man in relationship, we're just wired differently in our brains. So naturally, it's all. That's why it's going to be a little hard to get on the same page all the time. So the way we think is differently. So for sure, and when you don't have that experience, it's easy to just fall into the narrative of what is naturally said. But for sure, it's definitely been a challenge for me on both parts, on both sides, and not both, because it's not just a linear white and black thing, but in terms of other relationships and races that I've dealt with, is everyone comes with their own baggage. Just let's say that.
Absolutely. And then, even coming from Hamilton, New Jersey, right? Like I came from a predominantly white area, right? So I've had the opportunity to see the different levels of it. And everyone does come with their own baggage. And so I definitely agree with you on that as well. But I'm just generally speaking, that was my opinion.
Collectively in America, Black people's experience on a daily basis is hard. All right, this is like a swim upstream, swim against the current type of lifestyle from most Black people in America. And what does that produce? That produces hard people. That produces people with shells that aren't able to be penetrated or to be easily understood, or that is it okay to curse? I don't want to curse for no reason, but it produces people that are not with the bullshit. You understand? You also have a lot more experience with identifying BS, deciding whether you want to deal with it or not, and move on to the next, right? Because collectively, that is the Black experience in America. Black men and women can identify the BS earlier in the game than other cultures, right? Black women, Black men are less understanding because of more experience. For me personally, that's been my understanding and my experience in life. Now, when it comes to other races being easier, I can't really tell you what it's like to be another race. I can't really tell you what it's like to date outside of my race. I've only dated minorities, right? But the reality of it is that when it does come to Black women, you got to be a certain type of joker to be in a relationship with a Black woman, right? It's hard not to be a confident man, right? You're gonna fold under that pressure eventually, because the expectations is real. You understand? And that's why sometimes for Black men who date outside of their race, they're looked at by Black women as weaker, or looking to have taken the easier road, because historically or by society standards, Black women are harder than other races of women. And that's all understandable. But I'll also share this part of it too. As a man, as a professional, as a regular guy out here in the street, when I interact with dudes that I don't have a previous relationship with, most of them is not of quality. If I'm gonna be honest, you understand? The average joker that I run into, they're not of quality. Now I can only imagine what that's like, looking at and having that experience as a Black woman who is looking for a mate. That's gonna make you callous. It's gonna make you it's gonna make you be able to make decisions a lot quicker and be a lot less understanding, because you're dealing with more of the nonsense than you are of the quality. You understand? So that's why there's that rapid fire of, I ain't dealing with this, better go ahead with that. I ain't the one, or you got the right one, right? Because experiencing a Black man of quality who keeps his word, who meets expectations, who can provide, who has a moral compass, who doesn't have a past that you got to make efforts to to dig up. You understand? And all of this other baggage. I mean, that's a unicorn in many cases. You understand? And there's other specific questions that you need to ask if that's what the individual, as a man in the Black community, if those are all the things that he does measure up to, there's some other questions that you need to ask as well. You understand? If you get my drift. So I'll also just kind of, in defense for Black women. I mean, Black dudes ain't made it easy on Black women either, man. To be honest, for them to stand up to the plate so aggressively, compared to other races, there's a reason for that. It's definitely a reason for that. I mean, us as guys, we don't got a lot of male friends because of the reality that women is dealing with. You understand? Jokers can't keep their word off of basic stuff. They lie about, small things. You can't depend on them. They don't show up when they're supposed to. You understand? And that's just collectively. It's not no badger at any individual, but collectively, we got some growing to do as Black men, if we're gonna be honest. If we wanna have Black women who are not, receiving us or are not receiving us with open arms, we gotta produce a better package collectively.
Facts, Just. But I think, like, going back to what I said earlier, our women are so scorned collectively. But however, every now and then you run into a dude who's actually what you're looking for. But because you're so scorned and skeptical, you self-sabotage, right? You didn't come home until 20 minutes later. Yo, I was literally at the gym. I've been a teacher in this city for 10 years. I see my kids everywhere. I saw one of my kids, just like yesterday. He walked up to me and we were just rapping. Oh, you was texting that other girl? Yo, that's we work together. We got class tomorrow. You wouldn't be tripping if that was Tony, my other teacher, right? And I think a significant amount of relationships, men and women, you're right, very true. Men and women, that's what Tanya said. I'm speaking strictly on the topic that we were talking about. But correct, men and women got bad experiences. But like, it seems like maybe that's why the men are running so rapidly to other races. But my point is, you got to be healed. Because you can't be dragging, like if somebody else cuts you, don't bleed on me, bruh. Especially if you're coming in with all this baggage and trauma, and I'm willing to go with you through that healing process, understanding that it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, and you dealing with my bullshit on the other side, right? So you gotta have a great filter, right? You gotta have a great filter because you will run into that emotionally stable, fit man or woman, and by you not healing your old wounds, you ruin a good opportunity, and then you end up being that woman or man on Instagram and Facebook talking about, I'm done with these N's, I'm done with these B's, right? Because it's been bad opportunity after bad opportunity after bad opportunity. So I wish Mace was here, but that's why it's very, very important to go to counseling, to go to therapy, right? And because oftentimes too, like you go to therapy and counseling, you're not hearing nothing new. These are facts. I've been in relationship counseling twice, and both times my counselor told me I should become a relationship counselor. Everybody on this call now, at the absolute bottom of your relationship, call me, right? Even before this game, like it was always me, like who people came to. And like I wouldn't say nothing the entire time until it breaks and they come to me. And I just kind of like that's been a big fortifying part of all of our bonds. And like most of my friends, when it's trauma, like they come to me. So I believe for whatever reason, I got a good grip on the overall concept. And then also going to the other cultures, as the data says, they're far more likely to come from a home where there's been a successful marriage, right? So they know how it looks. Like even like with good, sticking to Black women and men, especially women, because most of us are raised by strictly women. You could have been raised by a dope woman, but you never saw her with a man, right? So maybe you're overly strong, or like, I don't need you. Yo, of course you don't need me. Like KD didn't need Steph and them to go to the Hall of Fame, but he needed them to win ships. LeBron didn't need Kyrie and D-Wade and them to go to the Hall of Fame first ballot, but he needed them to win ships. Shaq didn't need it. Everybody needs a good teammate. It's only a good marriage, a good relationship, if you don't need each other. because there's two powerful pieces coming together, right? But I believe for a man to get that leadership position, he must earn it 100%. It is not something that is just given to you. But for a woman to be that role in terms of like gender role, she must learn to be that, because a lot of us in our community, we don't come from that. Are black men offended when black women go outside of the race? Nah, I don't care. Like, do what you do. I think that's more unique than a black man going outside of the race. But do your thing. Like just said, we lacking too. As a collective, the black men are lacking the most. So Lord knows what kind of experience that they came from, what kind of culture they've been around. But I also think the culture you've been around is overrated. Like I went to school with all white people. I've never pursued a white woman. Never crossed my mind at all. Nothing against them, but it's just never. I never thought to do it. So personally, I'm not offended. Go ahead, Pizzle.
One thing I'll hop in there, and I felt KG when he said this. I think a lot of times it deals with proximity, right? Like when you think about friendships, a lot of your friendships, childhood friendships, the only reason you have them is because of proximity. You went to school with that person every single day. So when I look at like when I think about like Hamilton back in Trenton, like there's a lot of interracial relationships, and I think about like a lot of the black men. I'd be like, yo, like why you damn like all y'all got white baby mothers and white wives and all that, but I think proximity has a large play into that and like what's available, right? And you look at KG, like when he went to the dances and things like that, he went to dances with predominantly like white schools and things, so I can understand that a little bit if I throw it out there.
Makes sense. Any closing comments, fellas? Good money? All right, so great topic. I think the natural thing to next week is to we got a lot of information on trust and what it is. So I guess maybe that's the natural topic to go to next week. Appreciate all the engagement. Definitely a topic that hit home for a lot of people. And I also think it's why he's relevant now. Why the dude Kevin Samuels is getting so much attention, so much flow. He's hitting a lot of hot buttons that are important for a lot of people. And lastly, as G said, the pandemic has finally introduced a lot of married and people in relationships, finally introduced them to each other. So great job, great topic. Good job, fellas. See y'all next week. Peace out.